The first insult was quiet, barely above a whisper, but it cut through the hallway like broken glass. "Back door," said the auntie in the silver gele. "Help doesn't enter through the front." Ngozi paused, her hand still on the brass doorknob, her uniform starched and clean, face expressionless. She said nothing, just nodded, turned, and walked around the side of the sprawling estate like a shadow retreating into itself. The compound buzzed with celebration, lanterns strung across jacaranda trees, the laughter of Lagos elites spilling like wine from their wide mouths. It was a naming ceremony, the first son of Chief Oladipo's daughter, and everyone who mattered was invited. Except Ngozi. She entered through the kitchen, where oil hissed and servants barked orders in pidgin. She was told to sweep, then to carry trays, then to disappear. All day she moved like wind over stone, not seen, just used. No one noticed the way her fingers trembled. No one asked why the maid's eyes held the kind of grief you don't cry through, you survive it. She did not speak unless spoken to. She smiled when told to smile. She ate, standing beside the generator behind the compound wall, where the fumes made her dizzy and the rats scurried close. By dusk her bones ached, but dinner had just begun. Ngozi was handed a tray of water bottles. As she stepped into the main hall, voices clashed in heat and laughter. Men in agbadas reclined like gods. Women in velvet and gold giggled behind wine glasses. "Ah, even the maid has arrived," someone joked. Laughter. Ngozi kept walking. She placed the bottles gently, nodded, and turned. But a boy blocked her path. 11, maybe 12, braids, eyes full of questions. "Why are you always alone?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Because quiet people see everything." He nodded slowly, like her answer tasted real. Across the room, someone spilled wine. A server was scolded. The boy ran back to his parents. Ngozi melted again into the shadows. She didn't see the woman watching her from across the room, didn't know the whispers had already begun. "She looks familiar. She has her nose." Whose nose? The woman tilted her head. The late Madame's. At that, silence fluttered, brief, sharp, then broken by more laughter. Chief Oladipo sat at the head of the long table, flanked by dignitaries. His voice carried even when it shouldn't. "My daughter has brought honor to our house," he boomed. "A son, a strong name. Tonight we eat not as guests, but as legacy." A roar of approval. Ngozi returned to the kitchen, her fingers wrapped tightly around the edge of the sink. Her breathing slowed, then deepened, then stopped. She closed her eyes and remembered the gate, the screaming, the body lowered into the earth, the woman who had called her daughter, dead, buried, forgotten, but not by Ngozi. "I beg, go clean the veranda," a cook snapped. Ngozi obeyed. She stepped onto the veranda and stopped short. A man stood there, back turned, smoking, tall, broad shoulders. When he turned, her heart nearly stopped. "Toby," he blinked. "Ngozi?" She turned to leave. "But no, wait!" He stepped forward. "I thought you moved abroad." She shook her head. "They said, after your mother died, you left." She stared past him. "They said many things." He studied her. Why are you here?" She didn't answer. He whispered, "You know, this is your house, right?" She flinched. He took a step closer. "You're Ngozi Oladipo, first daughter of the late Ijiola. This is your grandfather's home." She met his gaze, eyes hard. "Not anymore. Not since they sent me to Abba. Not since they paid my silence with shame." Toby was quiet. "You think they don't know who I am?" she asked. "I didn't say that." "They know, But they needed a maid, not a scandal. He swallowed. Why did you come back? She exhaled. To see if they would recognize me before I reminded them. Inside, a toast was raised. Let the rightful heirs of the Oladipo name live long, Chief Oladipo declared. And for the first time all evening, Ngozi smiled. It was not a warm smile. She turned from Toby and walked back inside. The dinner had reached its peak, and Ngozi was done waiting. Ngozi's steps were quiet but no longer unsure. She no longer carried trays. She carried truth. And that truth sat inside her like a fire, wrapped in silk. "Bring palm wine," someone called from the far end. A server tapped Ngozi's shoulder. "Go now. Kitchen they wait." She didn't move. "Ngozi?" She turned to face the young girl, a junior maid, barely 17. Her voice soft. "Let someone else serve them." The girl blanked. "But if you no go, dem go vex." Ngozi smiled. "Let them." In the main hall, Chief Oladipo lifted his glass again. "Tonight, I honor my daughter, but also my late wife, Ijeoma, who would have loved this moment." The room hushed in reverence. Ngozi stepped forward from the side door, not with a tray, but with a photo frame wrapped in cloth. She walked down the length of the table like it was a path carved in memory. Every eye turned. "She looks familiar again," whispered the woman in the emerald gelée. Ngozi reached the head of the table and stood directly across from the chief. "May I speak?" she asked. The room tensed. Someone laughed nervously, but Oladipo, clearly drunk with attention, waved his hand. "Let the maid speak. She looks like she's seen a ghost." Ngozi unwrapped the frame. A photo, faded but clear. A young woman in white lace, smiling. Her mother, Ijeoma. Beside her, in the photo, a little girl, bright-eyed, clinging to her waist. Ngozi held the photo up. "This was taken in this house, before the guests, before the chandeliers, before you sent her away." Oladipo leaned forward, squinting. "Ijeoma's daughter," she said, voice steady. "The one you erased." Gasps. "No, that's not." Oladipo started. Toby entered then, walking quickly, holding something in his hand. A faded envelope, stamped, government seal, birth certificate. He placed it on the table, quietly. Ngozi spoke louder. "I never asked for your name. I never asked for a place, but I watched my mother die of shame, and tonight I watched you toast your legacy while I poured water into hands that never reached for mine." Silence swallowed the room. "I am Ngozi Ijeoma Oladipo, first daughter, first truth, and I will no longer walk through the back door." She turned and walked away, leaving the room frozen like a spell had been cast. Aunties stared. The child with braids whispered, "I knew she was a queen." Chief Oladipo tried to stand but staggered. His voice cracked. "She died before we could settle it. It was complicated." But no one heard him over the quiet storm Ngozi left in her wake. Later, Toby found her near the gate, arms folded, eyes dry. "You did it, Ngozi," he said. "I didn't come to destroy them. I came to remind them what they built on silence." The compound remained quiet behind them until the boy from earlier ran out, clutching something. He handed her a card, a drawing, stick figures, one woman, one house, and above it, a crown. "For you, because you're the real owner." Ngozi knelt, took the card, and for the first time in years, she let herself cry. The compound changed overnight. Where laughter had echoed, whispers now filled the halls. The story traveled like smoke, thin, unstoppable, curling through every room, every corridor. The help avoided eye contact. The guests left early, some out of shame, others out of fear. In the family quarters, Chief Oladipo sat in silence. Not the silence of pride, but the silence of an old man finally hearing his past without denial. Ngozi didn't return to the servants' quarters. She had packed what little she owned and sat in the garden near her mother's old hibiscus tree. Still blooming after all these years, red as spilled memory. Toby brought her a flask of tea. "They're calling a family meeting," he said quietly. Ngozi didn't look up. "To do what? Apologize in front of china plates and crocodile tears?" He knelt beside her. "You shook something, Ngozi, and they can't bury it again. I don't want their seat at the table. I just wanted to burn the silence." Inside, Oladipo met with his siblings and legal advisors. His face was sunken, his voice hoarse. "She's my granddaughter. The child Ijeoma bore after I told her not to keep it. I gave her money to go. I thought I'd never have to face it." His brother, Alji Karim, leaned forward. "And now she must be acknowledged, formally." A pause. "And the will?" Another pause. "Rewrite it," Oladipo said. At the market the next day, women who had once mocked the quiet maid now whispered in awe, "That girl? Ngozi? Ah, Oladipo's granddaughter, the first daughter's child. I knew it. She had the mother's walk." Back at the estate, a knock sounded on Ngozi's guest house door. It wasn't Toby. It was the woman in the emerald jelle, the one who had whispered first. "My name is Auntie Yetunde. I knew your mother." Ngozi opened the door, but said nothing. She was kind, quiet, too quiet for this house, too loud for exile. Ngozi replied. Yetunde nodded. "We failed her, but we can do right by you." Ngozi stepped aside. They sat. Yetunde opened her purse and pulled out an old letter, folded 100 times, addressed to Chief Oladipo. The ink had run, but the words were still there. "I kept the child, Baba. I could not destroy what was made in love, even if made in shame. I name her Ngozi, for she is my blessing in the storm." Ngozi's hands trembled. "She wrote this before she died," Yetunde said. "She mailed it. We found it too late. Oladipo never read it. He said she vanished by choice, but he chose her vanishing. That is why he's calling the elders and the lawyers and the gods if they'll listen." Ngozi folded the letter gently. Later that evening the compound gathered, servants, family, elders, children. Chief Oladipo stood before them all, his agbada simpler than usual. "I have failed," he said, "and this house will carry that shame in its foundation, but it will not continue, not while I breathe." He turned to Ngozi. "Ijeoma's daughter, Ngozi, you are not a servant in this house. You are its root." He turned to the notary. "Effective immediately, her name is restored to our lineage. Her mother's quarters will be rebuilt, her inheritance recognized." A murmur, a shift, but Ngozi only said, "Don't give me a room to lock me inside again." And Oladipo nodded. "No doors, only windows, and one seat at the table. Yours." She didn't cry. She walked to the boy with braids, took his hand, and led him inside. The table was full, but a chair was waiting. Weeks passed, but the house did not return to what it was. The curtains stayed drawn longer. Laughter was softer, conversations more careful. The name Ngozi, once whispered, was now spoken clearly, even proudly. Staff members began addressing her with quiet respect, some even pausing their work when she walked by, not out of fear, but reverence. But Ngozi remained cautious. Her place at the table was given, not earned, not yet. And trust, once broken, doesn't return in a day. She moved like someone walking on ground that had once betrayed her, a cautious grace that came not from weakness, but memory. She started small, organizing the house accounts, correcting long-ignored payment errors for the workers, sending a boy to school whose mother had scrubbed floors for 20 years. She met with cooks, drivers, even gatemen, not as a superior, but as a listener. She remembered their names, their stories. She didn't live in her mother's rebuilt quarters. She stayed in the guest house still, door always open. That door became a symbol. People came to it not to serve, but to speak, to share things they had long buried. Auntie Yetunde visited often, sometimes with gifts, other times with silence. They would sit under the hibiscus tree, shelling groundnuts and talking about Ijoma, each story a thread mending a tapestry torn too long. In those conversations, Ngozi learned that her mother had loved music, used to hum songs from Onitsha while braiding hair on the back porch. Ngozi began humming them too. One afternoon, she took the gardener's daughter to the clinic herself. Another day she attended a church fundraiser in her mother's name, standing quietly in the back pew as the pastor spoke of unseen sacrifices. She never sought attention, yet people noticed. Then one day, a lawyer from Abuja arrived. Ngozi was summoned to the main lounge. Oladipo sat in the center, dignified, but older somehow. Time had caught up with him. The strength in his voice still lingered, but it was softened now by regret, by time, by the long road back to decency. The lawyer cleared his throat. As per the newly amended will, Ngozi Oladipo is to be named executor of her mother's foundation, Ijoma's house. Ngozi looked up. What foundation? Oladipo spoke. It will help young women cast out like she was. Girls with nowhere to go but everything to give. That was your mother's dream, even when she had nothing. We'll fund it. You'll lead it. She said nothing for a moment. Then she placed her hand over her heart. And what about this house? Oladipo smiled faintly. One day it will be yours too, but you already own the part that matters. He tapped his chest. Legacy is not what we leave in vaults. It's what we rebuild when we finally remember the truth. That night, the house hosted a quieter dinner. No photographers, no dignitaries, just family. Even the help were invited, not to serve, but to sit. Ngozi sat beside the boy with braids. He passed her a note, folded from napkin paper. "You're the only reason this house doesn't feel cold anymore," it read. She smiled. The child rested his head on her arm and whispered, "You made it a home." Across the table, Oladipo cleared his throat and stood up. He didn't raise his glass for wealth or bloodline, not this time. He raised it to her, to the woman who taught us that silence, once broken, can become music, to Ngozi. They drank, and after the toast, something unexpected happened. The staff, old cooks, shy maids, quiet drivers, began to applaud, one by one, until the whole house rang with a rhythm more honest than any applause that had ever graced that dining hall. Later that night, after most had gone to bed, Ngozi stood outside by the hibiscus tree alone. The moonlight spilled like silver cloth across the garden. She whispered her mother's name, Ijoma. A breeze passed through the petals, rustling them softly, and in that moment, Ngozi didn't just feel peace, she felt seen. And in the distance, the wind through the hibiscus leaves sounded like Ijoma's laughter, soft, enduring, and finally at home.